and they're still vying for power to this day.
Yeah.
Through the bloodlines,
Yeah.
through governments and empires,
Yeah.
and nothing has changed. All
Nothing
that
has
is
changed.
all that is
And
new is that which has been forgotten.
Yeah.
well, and we're told I'm going to connect the meaning of the beast empires. I mean, the beast
Oh, yeah.
empires, and there's also the metallic empires are the same, but the beast is a great analogy because Antichrist is called the beast, comes from the beast empire.
Mhm.
Whether or not you're talking about Daniel 7 or Daniel 8. And these are the empires of the rephaim after the flood.
Yeah.
These are the
Yeah.
bloodlines. This is the beast empire. And in the end time, there'll be 10 of these kings that are going to be groups of empires or
right.
spheres of influence or trading
Yeah.
blocks that come to power in the end time. And you have all of these royal bloodlines that are going to be vying to be that bloodline that's going to have the European, I think there'll be 2 European blocks. Obviously, there's going to be a North American block of some sort. And I say of some sort because it's not clear to me that the U.S. remains as one country. It all comes together to create
and
the
one of
larger
those
group of nations that might include Britain in it.
Might. And it seems like
Oceania.
one of those powers, one of those kings ends up being the Antichrist.
Yeah.
So it seems like these bloodlines are contending to be the ultimate bloodline.
They're jockeying for
They're trying to
primo
become
Antichrist position.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Right.
which kind of harkens back to
So
Nimrod, right? Because he was kind of the first of that.
Yeah. Archetypical. That's where the Babylon religion comes from, right?
Yeah.
The Enochian religion of the antediluvian epoch. And that's why it's part of organizational structure and why it rises the beast of empires in Revelation.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be that same religion, part of that same organizational structure that was at Babel and at in the antediluvian epoch. And it's interesting, there's a term called the terrible ones that I'm going to talk about in the new book as well. And particularly it's in Isaiah and it's also in Ezekiel 31 and 32. These are the ones that the evil on earth as Rephaim kings and are the ones that are in. And it's interesting that Gilgamesh all goes to the Cedar Forest, which is on Mount Hermon, to kill King Habada, who is the terrible one, who was commissioned by the god to do terrible things to human beings. And actually, it's not Gilgamesh who kills him; it's an Echidna or Enkidu who is going to lose his life because he disobeyed the gods and killed King Habada, who's a super chimera creature after the flood. But yeah, it's very, very interesting that if you look at the language in the Bible, how it just sort of meshes perfectly. And when people are looking at the beast empires of 7, which we're told in Revelation, you only get 4 of them in Daniel 7 or Daniel 8. And Daniel 8 is another prophecy that links in and tells about Daniel 7 and Revelation 13 and 17. So it's got 7 and Daniel 8 as well. And it's not like it's one or the other, it's both prophecies. So it's telling us that Antichrist is likely going to come out of that Greek empire. And Greek was made up of Alexander, the 4 kings that came up afterwards, then Rome, and then the end time empire, and then Antichrist is the 8th king. In Daniel 7, you get Babylon forward with Nebuchadnezzar, who's the terrible one who brings about the apocalypse on the people of Judah and takes them back to Babylon. And he's one of those kings as well. And before that, you have, I think it's probably Babel, even though Assyria is in there as well. But understand Assyria comes from Nimrod anyways. So it's kind of one of the same. But I lean more towards the archetype figure with Nimrod, with the beginning of the Babylon religion. And then the second of polytheism that dominates after the flood is Egypt. But Egypt and Babel and Assyria as part of that 7.
Well, that makes sense because Egypt, as I think you point out in this book, or maybe in your previous interviews, Egypt seems to ultimately derive its same mystery cult motif from Atlantean, antediluvian sort of
Yeah.
Nephilim. That whole
Yeah.
system.
Right.
That Nephilim.
And
mystery cult.
it was the country that let Israel become a nation and then enslaved them. And the beast empires are all centered around what happens to Israel, which is why I also leave Assyria in there as well as part of the Nimrod Empire, because they're the ones who bring the apocalypse to the Northern Empire and disperses the northern tribes to the four winds of prophecy. And I don't use that term loosely. And I have a document on that too for people if they want it. And it's got to do with the four horsemen. And you have Syria that plays this large role. And also keep in mind, I'm just going to throw this out, but there's a second Exodus coming in the end time where the lost tribes are going to awaken and are going to be taken back in a second Exodus to meet those who flee Judea at the time of the abomination. So it's a lot happens after the abomination, and the Exodus does, and it happens after Judea flees to be protected. That's recorded in Matthew 24, Mark 10, and Luke, and also in Revelation 12. But I do think the awakening happens in the first 3.5 years, just as you got the 144,000 that are preaching the gospel and awakening the lost tribes.
Yeah.